Some phrases travel through the centuries carrying more than just words, as if they were keys. As above, so below. Who spoke it first? An anonymous sage? A silent initiate? It echoes through ancient papyri, quiet temples, manuscripts guarded, like relics. But what does it really mean? It doesn't feel like a phrase meant to be rushed. There's something in it that asks for a pause and a deeper listening. It's almost like we're facing a riddle hidden in plain sight. How many times have we passed by those words as if they were distant poetry, without realizing they might be describing the invisible workings of reality, as if they were the signature of a universal secret? Something so fundamental that it governs both the orbit of a planet and the flow of a thought. Is that an exaggeration? Or is it the kind of truth that only reveals itself to those who dare to go deeper? Imagine, just for a moment, that everything in the universe, from the grandest to the most intimate, follows the same pattern. How does that change the way you see yourself? And what if the chaos in the world isn't just a reflection of politics, economics, or the news, but also of something internal, unresolved? Maybe the outer reality is just wearing the colors of what we carry inside. Could that be the so below? Throughout history, entire civilizations embraced this idea as a foundation. The Egyptians, the Gnostics, the Hermeticists, they all spoke of correspondence. The idea that the micro reflects the macro, that human beings are not separate from the cosmos, but extensions of it. It doesn't sound like religion nor science. It sounds like something more essential, a reminder, as if the universe were trying to recognize itself through us. Today, in the age of information, we have access to nearly everything except ourselves. We live on the surface. But these ancient words, whispered as if they carried a secret, seem to point in the opposite direction, to look within as if searching for the sky. Because maybe the sky is exactly there, not above the clouds, but behind our eyes. And what if what we call above isn't a place, but a state of consciousness? So why has this phrase survived for millennia without being forgotten? Why? Does it still give chills to those who truly contemplate it? Perhaps because it doesn't promise answers, only the invitation. An invitation to see the world with new eyes. And to realize that, by transforming what's within, something begins to shift out there too. But what exactly starts to change when we accept that we reflect the whole? What begins to awaken when we stop searching outside for what has always been inside? Have you ever felt that there's a pattern behind things? A kind of hidden design, as if reality follows silent rules even when everything seems random. The Kybalion suggests so, and that phrase, as above, so below, would be more than just a spiritual aphorism. It would be a code, a living formula, pulsing behind what we call the world. But who could have written that code? Modern physics is approaching something curious. It shows us that particles follow almost choreographed laws even when separated by vast distances. Electrons dance with precision. Galaxies spiral with symmetry. Coincidence? Or evidence that everything moves according to an invisible harmony, as if reality were governed by a deep and silent intelligence? Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary author of Hermetic teachings, said the universe is mental, that everything is mind. Today, neuroscience acknowledges that the brain doesn't just process reality, it interprets it, constructs it, gives it meaning. But what if that mind isn't just our individual mind, but something collective, cosmic, a great thought dreaming in forms, colors, stories? The idea of correspondence, this Hermetic principle, suggests that what is above, the spiritual, archetypal, mental plane, manifests below in the physical, emotional, tangible world. Just as a plant already exists in the seed, the reality we live in existed in some invisible form before it became concrete. Everything we see was thought before it became matter. Everything we feel was energy before it became an event. So, what if every choice we make, every intention, every silent feeling is collaborating with that code? As if our internal states are commands for a moldable reality. Have you ever wondered why certain situations repeat like patterns that insist on returning? Maybe because we haven't yet changed the above from which they originate. And what if the outer reality is just the visible reading of a larger system that we're also part of? What changes when we understand that life doesn't just happen to us, but also through us? That the world out there might be following the path of what we create inside? Maybe the Hermetic code doesn't need to be deciphered like a riddle. Maybe it just needs to be lived. But how do you live something you can't yet name? How do you dance with a force you only feel when you fall silent? There's an idea that at first glance seems absurd, but keeps returning, like an ancient whisper in quiet nights. What if the universe is alive? Not an impersonal machine, but a presence, an organism, an expanding consciousness. What if what we call reality is, in fact, the pulse of something much greater? That also pulses within us? Could that be why certain songs make us cry, even if we don't understand why? For centuries, science described the cosmos as a mechanical clock made of predictable parts and precise gears. But gradually, that view started to fail. Quantum laws don't obey classical logic. Particles behave as if they have choice. Energy fields intertwine across distances where nothing should connect. Suddenly, the universe stopped looking like a machine and started looking like a mind. And where are we in this invisible puzzle? Inside our bodies, a heart beats without us asking. Cells renew, neurons fire, dreams emerge. All of this happens in silence, in the darkness within. But what if that silence is the same one that echoes out there, in the emptiness between stars? What if what happens in interstellar space is an extension of what happens within us, in dimensions we haven't yet learned to access? Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a kind of shared foundation of the human psyche, where archetypes, symbols, and ancestral emotions live. Physics speaks of the unified field. Spirituality speaks of the all. Different words, perhaps describing the same thing. A force that moves through us, connects us, transforms us. And what if the love we feel isn't ours, but the very heart of the universe expressing itself through us? How many times have we felt an inexplicable intuition, a silent certainty that comes from nowhere? How many times has a coincidence guided us with precision? Maybe it's not coincidence. Maybe it's a dialogue, a calling, as if the universe is constantly trying to remind us that we are not separate from it. Because we never were. We just forgot for a while. But what happens when we begin to remember? And what if that remembering doesn't come from the mind, but from the body, from the blood, from the silence between two thoughts? Maybe the universe isn't out there waiting to be reached. Maybe it's already here, waiting to be felt. But what happens when we truly feel that we are part of it? What transforms when we stop looking at the sky as something distant and start sensing it, pulsing within us? If the above is the realm of consciousness, clarity, and tension, then the below is the fertile darkness where everything begins. But not the darkness of fear, rather the darkness of mystery, of what hasn't yet been seen, but pulses, of what is silent, but speaks. The subconscious is this invisible soil where thoughts, behaviors, desires are born. Have you ever stopped to think that almost everything you live begins long before you notice it? Freud said the unconscious governs 95% of our lives. Jung went further. He said that what does not become conscious controls us, and we call it fate. In other words, much of what you call I is acting under orders you didn't consciously write, as if within us there is an entire kingdom with its own laws, its own symbols, its own buried memories, a whole world forgotten. But this below is not a place of punishment or weakness. It is the fertile ground of creation. It's where reality begins to take shape, because the universe doesn't respond only to what we say or think. It responds to what we deeply feel, to what lives in our emotional underground. So, what's hidden in there? How many traumas have you buried like someone closing the door to a messy room, hoping to never open it again? In spiritual language, this is the realm of the shadow. In science, it's the limbic system, the emotional brain. In depth psychology, it's the personal and collective unconscious. Each tradition gives it a name, but they all recognize the same principle. What is below is the foundation of what is built above. In other words, what is hidden within us directly influences what manifests outside. Isn't that why the same patterns keep repeating? Many seek the above in search of elevation, transcendence, light. But they forget that true power lies in the below. A seed doesn't sprout in the sky, it emerges from the dark earth. The alchemical gold is hidden in the mud, say the ancient texts. So perhaps ascension only happens for those who have the courage to descend, to feel, to face. But what might be living inside you, waiting to be embraced before it can be transformed? What if the outer reality only changes when we begin to listen to what whispers in the dark? And what if, instead of denying the below, we learn to honor it, to understand it? Because maybe only then can we access the true balance between both worlds. But what arises when the light finally meets what was hidden? Look around. You. Every object, every structure, every visible detail. Before it existed in the world, it existed in someone's mind. An architect, an inventor, an artist, they all imagined before they built. But does that apply only to houses and bridges? What if the very reality we live in, with its encounters, challenges, and repetitions, is also a reflection of what we carry inside? What would it be like to realize that we think the world before we live it? Neuroscience reveals something impressive. The brain interprets internal signals as if they were external. It doesn't distinguish between what is remembered, dreamed, or experienced. This means that imagining something intensely already begins to form neural connections. And these connections become pathways, habits, patterns. So to what extent is what we call real life just the repeated result of old thoughts? And what happens when we decide to think differently? Thought is like an invisible paintbrush. It paints the layers of our emotional field, adjusts our attitudes, creates expectations that influence our choices. And when we choose, we attract. When we react, we repeat. When we believe, we create. This isn't just theory, it's experience. Just observe. How many times has something happened exactly as you feared? And how many times, when you changed your stance, did something inexplicably shift around you? But it's not just about positive thinking. The mind doesn't work only with words. It works with frequency, with intention, with coherence. Between feeling and thought, the universe, according to Hermetic teachings, responds to vibration, not to speech. So it's no use saying beautiful things if, deep down, we still vibrate with fear or lack. What's rooted within us is what builds the invisible walls of our daily life. And if there's an invisible architecture shaping our reality, every thought is a brick, every emotion, a cement, every belief, a foundation. The question is, where did the blueprints for your internal construction come from? Were they inherited, learned, imposed, or consciously chosen? Because as long as we don't know which design we're following, we'll keep living in houses we don't recognize as our own. But what if it were possible to redesign everything? To choose thoughts like someone choosing seeds to plant a new garden? What if reality isn't a reflection of what we deserve, but of what we hold internally as truth? Maybe the most important question isn't what I want from life, but rather what I'm thinking every day without realizing? Imagine looking into a mirror, but instead of your reflection, you see situations, people, encounters, challenges, everything that happens in the world around you. What if that mirror didn't reflect your body, but your vibration, your deepest emotions, beliefs, and thoughts? What if reality isn't something that simply happens, but something that gives back what you are, what you feel, what you emit? Quantum physics has made it clear. The observer alters the experiment. The mere presence of someone watching changes the behavior of particles. This isn't philosophy, it's scientific evidence. But what happens when we trade the microscope for everyday life? What if our way of seeing the world not only interprets, but also shapes what's in front of us? Could we be the unintentional creators of what we call destiny? Every frequency finds its reflection. It's as if the universe works through resonance. When you're at peace, everything seems to flow. When you're in chaos, everything jams. Is that coincidence or an echo? Could the events in our lives be showing us something about our own vibration? What if the outer world is simply revealing what we haven't yet seen within? There's an energetic logic behind this. Just as a radio station can only play what it's tuned to receive, our consciousness can only access experiences that match its frequency. This explains why some people live in repetitive cycles, while others seem to manifest real change. The question isn't just why is this happening to me, but what in me is being reflected out there. It's uncomfortable to think that everything we see may be reflecting something of ourselves. But it's also liberating. Because if reality responds to our internal state, then we can co-create new possibilities, not through control, but through awareness. The world behaves like a quantum mirror. It doesn't respond to what you say you want, but to what you truly are, deep down. But what are you emitting without realizing? What patterns are you still calling coincidence, when in truth they're reflections? And what if the world won't change while the image in the mirror stays the same? Maybe the key lies in changing the frequency, not the reflection. What if the universe is simply waiting for you to recognize yourself so it can reflect back a new face of reality? Some truths are so grand that, when spoken, they sound like poetry, but they are facts. Carl Sagan wasn't joking when he said, "We are made of star stuff." Literally, the atoms that make up your body, carbon, oxygen, iron, were forged in the hearts of stars that died billions of years ago. Before we were people, we were cosmos. And what if that's more than just a scientific curiosity? What if it's a call to remember? It's not just the body that carries this stellar heritage, it's the very fact that we exist with consciousness. Look at the sky. Each point of light is a story. Each star, a nucleus of possibilities. And here we are, on this little planet, capable of feeling longing, imagining futures, questioning our very existence. What other phenomenon in the universe can do that? What if human consciousness is the universe observing itself? Spiritual traditions have always known this, in their own way. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that the gods came from the stars and that our soul returns to them. In Hinduism, we are divine sparks incarnated. Science and spirituality, though they speak different languages, seem to point in the same direction. The sky is not distant. It is printed within us, like a forgotten map, like a sacred symbol waiting to be decoded. Have you noticed how the sky draws us in? How gazing at the stars quiets something inside us? Maybe it's because when we look up, something within aligns, as if the above weren't just geographical, but vibrational, as if the heavens remind us of who we are, or better yet, of what we were before we were called by the names we carry today. And what changes when we begin to live with that memory awakened? When we recognize that we are not just isolated individuals trying to survive, but living parts of an intelligent, vibrant, creative whole? Maybe our decisions change, maybe the rush slows down, maybe fear loses its grip. Because when you understand you're made of the same matter that forms the stars, what could ever make you feel small again? But are we ready to carry that memory? What if the whole process of self-knowledge is, in truth, a path back to our origin? Not to the place we came from geographically, but to what we've always been, before form. If we're made of stars, then what still sleeps within us? What could be born when we stop looking at the sky as something outside and begin to feel it inside? Most of us were taught to see the body as a machine, a structure that ages, gets sick, needs maintenance. But what if the body isn't just a vehicle, but a temple? Not in a religious sense, but as a sacred space designed to channel what lies beyond matter. And what if it's not just flesh and bone, but also an antenna, a sensitive bridge between the visible and the invisible? Think of the times you've felt a shiver for no reason, a premonition, an intuition that didn't come from logic, but from somewhere deeper or higher. The body perceives what the mind doesn't yet understand. It vibrates, it receives, it translates. Ancient traditions knew this. The chakras, for example, are not just mystical symbols. They represent energy centers that react to what we feel, think, and experience. They're not fantasies, they're maps of the invisible within us. Science is beginning to confirm what the ancients already knew. The heart, for example, emits an electromagnetic field stronger than the brain's. And this field changes according to our emotions. The water inside us responds to sound vibrations. Breathing alters mental states. We are connected wholly to something greater. We are not passive observers of the world. We are active participants, resonating with it at every moment. But we live as if the body were a burden. We deny its messages. We disconnect from it as if it were something separate from us. We stay trapped in the mind, trying to control everything through thought while ignoring the body's silent wisdom. It speaks, it always has. But to hear it, presence is required. Silence is needed, because maybe the above we so desperately seek is trying to communicate. Through the below, we carry in every cell. What if the body were the true altar where spirit manifests? A finely tuned instrument, a subtle radar. Have you ever wondered why practices like meditation, dance, singing, or conscious breathing have such power? Because they align what is above with what is below. They make the sound of the universe vibrate within us, not as theory, but as living experience. So, what happens when we stop seeing the body as an obstacle and start treating it as a channel? What changes when we honor what we feel instead of hiding it? Maybe, by tuning this sacred instrument we carry, something awakens, something is revealed. But what might be waiting to be received by this silent antenna we call the body? The human mind is a strange territory. It is both a tool and a labyrinth. It creates ideas, but also traps you in fears. It shows you solutions, and in the next moment, generates doubts. But what if the mind is more than just a thought-processing structure? What if it's actually a portal, a gateway between two planes, the material and the invisible, the concrete and the symbolic, the real and the potential? Nietzsche once said, "When you gaze into the abyss gazes back at you." That phrase holds discomfort, but also an invitation, because maybe the abyss isn't something out there, but a space within us, between what we already know and what we have yet to dare to touch. In this context, the mind is the edge of that abyss, a threshold between the known and the mystery. But what happens when we cross it? In physics, there's already talk of multiple realities, parallel universes, infinite possibilities that collapse into reality through observation. The mind, in this sense, is the focus. It's the button that chooses which version of reality is made manifest. Thoughts aren't just internal echoes, they're commands, energetic trails, as if we are tuning into frequencies all the time without realizing. Each thought, a key, each belief, a door. In spirituality, that same principle has another name: intention. The mind's focus as a bridge between worlds. When we meditate, pray, visualize, we're not just creating pretty images in our heads, we're opening channels. The mind behaves like a meeting point between heaven and earth, between what we desire and what we receive. And when we use the mind consciously, something shifts in the quality of what surrounds us. But there's a paradox. The mind can also deceive us. It can become a prison instead of a portal. It can replay old stories, inherited programs, pains that no longer belong to us. That's why recognizing the mind as a portal requires something rare: vigilance, clarity, choice. Because with every thought, we're feeding a path, a world, a reality. The question is, which one have you been feeding without realizing it? What if the secret isn't to control the mind, but to move through it, to use it as a tool, not a master? What if it's just a bridge and not the destination? Maybe by learning to quiet the noise, we can hear something that comes from a higher place or a deeper one. But what happens when we stop thinking so we can finally hear what lies beyond the mind? There are moments when, even with our eyes closed, we see with a clarity that defies explanation. Dreams arrive like nighttime films, filled with symbols, people who have passed on, places we've never visited. But is dreaming just the brain taking out the day's trash? Or could it be, as the ancients said, a direct channel to subtler dimensions of existence? What if, while we sleep, a part of us wakes up? Jung believed dreams are the language of the soul. They don't come to entertain. They come to guide, to reveal, to provoke. Each symbol, each emotion, each scene is an encoded message, like letters, arriving from a sender we haven't yet learned to identify. But who knows us better than we know ourselves? Who is writing to us, night after night, through those images that keep returning? In neuroscience, REM sleep is the stage of greatest brain activity. Paradoxically, it's when the body is most still, yet the brain lights up intensely. As if, by disconnecting from the logic of the physical world, we access a wider network, a field of information that the rational mind blocks during the day. This doesn't sound like magic. It sounds like the spirit's technology, like communication between realms. Indigenous traditions treat dreams as parallel realities. Shamans navigate them as if crossing into other worlds. In ancient Egypt, dream temples were used for healing and revelations. In many cultures, dreaming isn't sleeping, it's traveling, receiving answers, foreseeing events. So why, in the modern world, do we treat dreams as noise? Maybe because we've forgotten how to listen. What if every dream were an attempt by the above to speak to the below? A message from the subtle field trying to correct an imbalance, point to a truth, offer a path? Maybe we don't have to understand every detail, just feel the vibration of what was shown. Because sometimes what a dream wants to tell us doesn't fit into words. It fits into sensations, into silent decisions that shift the course of life. But how many messages have you ignored by waking up and saying, it was just a dream? What if nothing is just a dream? What if all those images are fragments of something trying to remind you of who you are and what you came here to do? What would change if, instead of discarding your dreams, you started reading them as sacred letters? What could be revealed if you chose to open those letters with an awakened heart? There is a language that cannot be spoken with the mouth nor understood with logic. It shows up in dreams, in visions, in coincidences that take our breath away. A butterfly that appears at the exact moment, a number that repeats like a whisper, an animal that crosses your path. What if none of it is random? What if the universe is speaking and we've just forgotten the language? The ancients knew. To them, the world was alive, full of hidden meanings. Fire wasn't just flame, it was transformation. The serpent, not just a reptile, it was rebirth, hidden wisdom. Every form, every color, every sound carried something beyond the obvious. It wasn't superstition, it was sensitivity. It was symbolic reading of reality, as if the universe wrote in images and the heart was the only key that could read them. Jung called this the archetypal language. Universal symbols that dwell in the collective unconscious and appear whenever the rational mind steps aside. They speak directly to the soul. They don't explain, they reveal. A symbol doesn't tell you what to think, it shows you where to look. And when a symbol appears, it doesn't ask for analysis, it asks for presence, attention, because something is trying to emerge, but we were taught to ignore those signs, to always seek logical, measurable, provable explanations. Yet life, in its most important moments, birth, death, love, loss, never explains itself. It can only be felt. And in those moments, symbols appear like portals between the visible and the invisible, as if the universe were saying, don't try to understand, feel, trust. What if every symbol were a bridge, a thread between what is above and what is below? When you see an animal in a dream, a figure in a book, an image that won't leave, maybe it's not coincidence. Maybe it's a message from the place where mystery lives. But who's sending it? And why now? The answer isn't out there. It's in the impact that image has on you. But what have you been ignoring? What signs have passed you by and been swallowed up by hurry, by skepticism, by doubt? What if the questions you've been asking are already being answered, just in another language? Maybe, to hear the universe, you don't need to understand. You need to remember. Remember the time when we knew how to read the world with the soul. Have you ever experienced something so unlikely, so perfectly timed, that for a moment you thought, this couldn't have been just a coincidence? An unexpected encounter. The exact phrase you needed to hear. A seemingly trivial choice that changed everything. What if chance isn't so accidental after all? What if life carries a kind of hidden intelligence, orchestrating every detail with precision? Carl Jung called this synchronicity, the meaningful connection between events that, at first glance, seem unrelated by cause. But when they happen, something inside you stirs, as if someone, somewhere, were giving you a sign, something greater than logic, as if the universe were stitching stories, not with needles, but with intentions. Quantum physics reminds us that everything is entangled, that there is no absolute separation between things, that each part carries the whole. Spirituality has always said the same, in symbolic terms. Everything is connected. But what if that's not just a beautiful idea? What if we truly are immersed in an intelligent field where every gesture, every word, every thought reverberates in directions we can't even imagine? Sometimes we feel like we're lost. But maybe we're just walking a road that only reveals the next turn when the time is right. And when we look back, we see that everything was there for a reason, that even what hurt needed to happen, not to punish us, but to move us, to shape us, to make us remember. But remember what? Maybe to remember that we are not alone, that there's an invisible design holding up the apparent chaos, an intelligence that acts without words, without a face, but with signs, with encounters, with repetitions that catch our attention. Maybe chance is just the name we give to what we can't yet explain, but that we deeply feel to be true. What if the most important moments in your life weren't random? What if everything that seemed like disorder was actually guiding you to something greater, more essential, more aligned? Maybe the question was never, why did this happen to me, but rather, where is this trying to lead me? And what if the design is already unfolding, just waiting for you to realize you're a part of it? Most people live as if time were a straight line. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. But what if that's just a practical and limited way of organizing? Experience? What if time is actually a field? A space where everything happens at once, like overlapping layers of the same existence? Haven't you felt that some moments seem to last forever while others slip by in seconds? Then maybe time isn't what we were told it is. Einstein said that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. That the distinction between them is a persistent illusion. That's not mysticism, it's physics. And when we combine this view with spiritual understanding, something begins to click in a strange, profound way. What if memories are more than just recollections? What if they're open portals? What if the future is already happening, just waiting for us to align with it? Think about déjà vu, that inexplicable feeling of having already lived something, or the premonitions that come. True? Are they mental glitches or windows through which our consciousness touches other timelines? What if the above is a place where time doesn't follow linear logic? And in that subtler plane, past and future communicate, and our choices here echo there, or vice versa. The human brain, in altered states, during deep sleep, meditation, or mystical experiences, seems to step out of that timeline. People report reliving entire lifetimes in seconds, meeting future versions of themselves, receiving answers that only make sense months later. Is it madness or access? Could there be subtler ways to move through time, not with the body, but with consciousness? If time is a dimension, then it too can be navigated, not with clocks, but with awareness, not with hurry, but with presence, because maybe every second holds infinite possibilities. Maybe tomorrow isn't somewhere far away, but dormant inside you, just waiting for your inner frequency to be ready to collapse that reality into form. But what happens when we stop chasing time and begin to fully inhabit it? What if true power lies in knowing that time doesn't drag us? We activate it. If the future already exists, then what is it waiting for to be accessed? And could it be that right now, the above and the below are meeting at a point beyond the timeline? Everything in the universe vibrates. Every sound, every color, every atom in motion emits a frequency. And human beings are no exception. Our thoughts, emotions, states of being, all of it vibrates. But what if that's more than just a pretty analogy? What if there truly is a unique energetic signature in each person? A silent frequency that determines what you resonate with and what you're repelled by. Science has already shown that the heart emits a powerful electromagnetic field, and that this field shifts depending on our emotions, anger, fear, gratitude, compassion. Each state generates a different wave, and these waves don't stay trapped inside us. They surround us. They touch the environment. They affect other people. Spirituality calls it an aura. Physics might call it a field. But what matters is, you're always transmitting something, even when you're silent. Have you ever walked into a space and felt a strange energy you couldn't explain? Or met someone and instantly felt either at ease or uneasy? That's not abstract intuition, it's resonance. Frequency meeting frequency. What you vibrate attracts what vibrates the same, not as punishment or reward, but as energetic affinity. So the question that starts to sting is, what is your life reflecting about your vibration? Many people seek answers, signs, miracles, but carry within them a frequency of fear, control, or lack. They want to attract peace, but vibrate anxiety. They want love, but feel rejection. They want abundance, but live trapped in scarcity. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Because the good news is, frequency can be changed. Your inner state can be recalibrated. But first, you have to notice where you're vibrating now. There's no button to instantly shift the soul's frequency. But there is intention. attention, and practice. Breathing, silence, real gratitude, not the forced kind. Contact with nature, care in your thoughts, all of that is tuning. Like a musical instrument that needs adjusting before it can play its deepest melody. And if your life has felt out of tune, maybe it's not bad luck, just a lack of resonance. But what would your soul sound like if you paused to listen? What kind of reality would you begin to attract if your vibration matched what you truly want to live? Maybe the frequency you need isn't in the future, nor in your circumstances. Maybe it already exists, just waiting to be accessed. Most people expect great revelations to come in extraordinary moments. An eclipse, a deep meditation, a trip to a sacred place. But what if the truth isn't where we look with reverence, but where we've stopped looking? What if it's hidden, in the ordinary, in the breath we forgot to feel, in the glance we exchanged without noticing, in the silence between two common sentences? The oldest masters spoke with simplicity. Buddha pointed to a flower. Jesus spoke of seeds, birds, and fig trees, not because the mystical world was far away, but because it was here. In the ground we walk on, in the bread we eat, in the present moment. Maybe the real above isn't beyond the clouds, but right within what seems too small to notice. The human mind has gotten used to seeking the extraordinary. It wants grand signs, heavenly proofs, answers that light up like lightning in the sky. But the Spirit speaks softly. It shows up in subtle choices, in quiet intuitions, in coincidences we only notice once the day is done. And what if the miracle you've been waiting for already happened today, while you were distracted by other things? The below, what we live in the body, in routine, in repetitive tasks, is not less sacred than the spiritual plane. On the contrary, it's where the invisible becomes material. It's through touch, through gesture, through word, that the eternal expresses itself. The ordinary is the stage of the divine. But we're so used to ignoring what is simple that we spend our lives chasing the extraordinary, without realizing it was always right in front of us. What if the secret of life isn't to search for the sacred, but to remember it in the simple? What if every conscious breath is a prayer? What if every small choice made with presence is a ritual? Maybe we are surrounded by portals every day. We've just forgotten how to see them. Maybe as above, so below isn't a phrase to be understood, but to be lived in the most ordinary things we do. But what happens when you begin to live as if every moment were sacred? As if every detail were a sign? Maybe the world doesn't need to change. Maybe we just need to start seeing again, with the eyes we lost along the way. And then, what might be waiting to be revealed within what you thought was just routine?